Welcome to the In-Betwixt and In-Between. This is Leadership Limbo, a podcast aimed at helping leaders embrace the discomfort and power of leading themselves and others in the midst of it all. We blend real insight with practical tools to help you lead with self-awareness, purpose, and influence wherever you are on your leadership journey. I'm Josh Hugo, one of your co-hosts, and I'm joined today by my good friend and co-host, John Clark. John, how are you?
I am good. It is nice and cold, so I can wear sweaters, which a portly fellow like me likes sometimes because they're baggy and less tight. So that's good.
Did you say a portly fellow?
Portly fellow. No, portly.
That's a good word. It also makes me think of port wine. And port wine is a very seasonal drink right now. So sweaters, portliness, and port wine feels like a...
Portly makes you sound refined. I mean, it's better than saying like just fat, right? I mean, so being portly sounds like, it's almost like I planned it. My buddies in college, we always would rub our stomachs and say, you can't teach this, right? You know, it's like when you're portly, it sounds like this is intentional. I've made this choice.
There's lots of like refined phrases that really try to soften the blow. Like my English uncle would often say like, oh, I was overserved last night. I'm like, you overserved yourself. This was your choice, buddy.
You were
But yeah, being overserved.
Yeah.
Portly.
It's like Cartman-esque from South Park. I'm not fat, I'm just big boned, only portly sounds even better.
Yeah.
It's so yes, anyway, sweaters. I love them.
Sweaters, yeah. And we're all feeling great because the day that you're listening to this podcast, we now know for a fact that Notre Dame is in the playoffs. We are recording this before the playoffs, so we're just manifesting this. Otherwise, that statement's going to age very poorly. But I did send John a text message about 11 weeks ago, and I said, we're going to finish this year 10-0, and we're going to go to the playoffs and win it all. And I said, this is going to age really well, and I hope it still does.
We're on a knife's edge with Josh's prediction right now. So let's hope by Sunday at about 12:30 Eastern that Notre Dame has slipped their way in somehow to the chagrin of others, but to our general satisfaction and overall happiness. So,
and for our listeners, we're going to be healthier versions of ourselves if Notre Dame's in. And that's actually a really early segue into what we'll talk about here in a few minutes.
Exactly. If those things, if that stress of Notre Dame is the thing that finally got me to get Instagram and Instagram threads off my phone, so I'm not sucked into it, then that stress is worth it right now. So thank you. Thank you, Notre Dame football, for putting yourself in a precarious situation so that I avoid the national conversation on whether or not we deserve to be in the playoffs. So there you go.
And I think our advice today will extend beyond just driving yourself into near insanity based on social media to decide that your health is important. But there are lots of reasons we get there, and if that's one that's worked for you, great. John will actually introduce more about our topic today in a minute. But just last week, a reminder, we talked about the right mindsets of being developed. So you're a manager developing others, but you're also a manager hopefully being developed by somebody else. And if not, you should still be working actively to develop yourself. And so just how did you kind of think about that? One of the goals in our homework last week was to have you reflect on the posture that you take into your own development. Are you coming towards development from your supervisor, from the people who are responsible with you to develop? Or are you potentially running away from that? Or kind of like, I've already achieved what I need to achieve. I'm now a manager, a senior manager, a director, et cetera. Do I really need to be developed? And so hopefully nobody is thinking that way, but even asking the question, it's probably less of a yes or no, but more of a like, where do you fall on the spectrum? And if you identify that, you know what, I do kind of push away a little bit, I hope that that reflection allows you to think about some different responses in the future. So that being said, John, I'm going to pass it to you to kick off a little bit of what we've already teased.
Yep. And I think before I get into mine, we want to remind folks to please subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcast. It's also on YouTube. If you want to follow it there, then you'll see clips pop up occasionally. So just encourage that and just engage with us. Send us some comments. Really, one of our goals, I think, for now and going forward is we just want to find ways to ask questions that people can respond to, share ideas so we can share more ideas than just our own on the podcast. So thanks for doing that. And then speaking of running away, at least if you're running away, hopefully that is burning some calories, right? So while we don't encourage you to run away from development, if you are doing it, you need to literally run, because today's episode is about health and about health as you as a leader. So a little bit of a joke there, but we do think that this is actually a really good time in the beginning of December to talk about that. I think often this will come up in January, and we think it's important to get ahead of that. I think as a leader, how are you beginning to think about where you're at now with your health and making shifts or changes as needed, right? Our goals are that you are beginning to think about what it means to be the healthiest version of yourself as a leader and manager, okay, in a variety of ways. And to know that you have the responsibility of being attuned and aware of the health of your team. So, and those two
Mhm.
play off of each other. And Josh and I have talked about this quite a bit. You have to be the healthiest version of yourself, and people have to note that you are working towards that health and that balance, or at least, I actually don't love the idea of, for example, work-life balance. I just believe in integration. Like, do I see all parts
Mhm.
of myself and everything, and am I able to like meld those things together and help them to find integration with each other and to find alignment with each other? I actually like that better. And so if your team can see that it's important to you to build that integration of your life and your health and your work for yourself, they're going to feel encouraged to do that for themselves as well, right? And so today we want to explore what health is, why it's important for you as a leader to be healthy, what people replace health with as leaders sometimes, so what they do instead of that and why that's problematic, and then some suggestions to think about that too, is so that we hope that it carries you through the month of December and hopefully into the new year ready to kind of align those things. So Josh is going to lead us on our first question and maybe add some reflections to what I just said there. So what do you got,
Yeah.
man?
No, I think that's a great frame, John. And I think the first question really is just to pause on the word health. We've said it a few times, and I think there's initial connotations of that word, but we want to initially begin by saying it's a more expansive sense of health than just physical. So, what are we talking about? Physical health. So, we can start with that, but mental, spiritual, communal, relational health. As we kind of think about that list of different forms of health, I think there are some that we're more quickly drawn towards. So I think physical health is usually an initial connotation for a lot of us, which is, okay, well, am I exercising? Am I running? Side note, I don't recommend running 4 miles on the Thanksgiving turkey trot if you haven't run for 2 years before that, especially over the age of 40 with shoes that are a little bit too old. Just naming that for a friend, not anything to do with myself or the fact that I'm limping on my left foot. But the point of like physical health, absolutely an important part of your overall health. I play basketball on Fridays. I was like between the flu and a gardening accident, no joke, where
You
I
are
hurt my
you
knee.
are crushing it at 40.
November was brutal, man. November November was brutal. I didn't play basketball for like 5 weeks and I got back out today and it was good for me on a number of levels. And it was good to be in a social space. It was good to be physical and to run, to have some healthy competition, to have fun. But the physical health part, like I started by 7:15 in the morning. I knew like I was coming into the day feeling pretty focused and kind of liberated almost from a little bit of like the malaise that can take place if you're not taking care of your physical health.
Yeah.
So that's one type of health. John, how about another one that jumps out to you?
Yeah, I think mental. I'll bleed into spiritual a little bit, and I know that term carries different weights for different people, but we do think there is both the mental, like what am I doing to support my mental acuity and my sharpness, and expanding my brain and expanding my thinking, and doing that in healthy ways. Certainly, spiritual is more of like that connection of all parts of me, whether it's to a larger being or to the world at large or whatever it might be.
Mhm.
And we think thinking about that, regardless of your affiliation or religious belief, is important. And I think if you're not kind of thinking about something that's beyond the mental and the physical, that you're kind of limiting that overall connection, right? So
Mhm.
I think in that space, just thinking about what am I doing to expand my mind? What am I doing to learn and to grow? And also just to create less fuzziness up there. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
I joked earlier that I had to get rid of Instagram in part because I was abusing it, because I was just looking for themes and threads and things to get me worked up about Notre Dame football because for whatever reason. So yesterday I'm sitting in the doctor's office. I'm like, I'm getting rid of this. Like I can't do this anymore. And within 24 hours, the ability not to go to my phone and like click on that has been very good.
Yeah.
So, that I needed that mentally to get rid of that. And it kind of felt like when you pour a soda and you see all that foam in there and it just needs to like fizzle out and kind of get rid of it.
Mm.
It has felt like that, you know. So
Hmm.
what are you doing mentally, better setting yourself spiritually as well? Josh, why don't you want to share about communal and relationship and why that's a part of this as well?
Yeah. So I think the definition extends to your social relationships and your social health. I think humans are by nature social creatures. And we talk a lot about the themes of connection, which again has a through line between, the physical health activity that I referenced moments ago with regards to basketball was also a social activity.
Yeah.
And the communal activity was a chance to reconnect with colleagues and friends from the past. And that carries a lot of benefit to your overall ethos, to your overall health as well. And so I think the point of this first question is just to name for our listeners, when we're talking about health, it's more than just what your doctor says. And I think that's an
Right.
important frame to think about because some of us might be dealing with chronic health issues and your physical health may consistently be a challenge. And it's like, well, I can't get to 100% there ever. That's okay. I know that's a challenge, but there's other ways to think about our health as leaders that extends beyond that kind of maybe initial connotation for most of us. So
Yep.
I'm going to pass it back to you, John. I think the next question really gets at why are we talking about this?
Yeah, and I don't think anything we're going to say here is shocking or you're going to be like really surprised by it, but I think it's always is great to be reminded of why is health essential for ourselves. And I do think it starts with that. Why is it essential for ourselves? But in a podcast where we believe this is about like interconnectedness and the limbo of things and how things are interconnected and why there's challenge between things, it's also essential for those who we lead as leaders on a variety of levels, and then ultimately for the organizations we're a part of, or perhaps we have a really high influence in, right?
Hmm.
And so, I'm realizing I kind of went a little bit off of our topics here. So I think Josh was supposed to lead this one, which is my fault. But I want so maybe it's a good spot because I think Josh, I like to ask you these questions because I think you've thought about it a lot. I see it
Yeah.
in the way that you have led for 10 or more years. Whereas I think this has been a little bit more of a journey to get to a good spot. At some points, I've had to like remove myself from the work to get better at it.
Mm.
And so let's start with the idea of why, we'll start with this question. Well, let's go to this one first. Why is it important for ourselves first and foremost? Like, why do we have to think about health for ourselves? And then
Yeah.
maybe build that into, well, then ultimately, why is that practice for ourselves important for our teams?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's a great question. For ourselves, it's almost hard for me to answer that without like the intersection of ourselves and our teams. I
Yeah,
mean,
maybe take it there then. Yeah.
I mean, I think that the answer is like when we're framing this under the idea of being a leader and a manager, that the reason that your health it should be important to you individually because it is you're the only one of you and it
Yeah.
is your life. You want to really be exploring the outer limits of all of the possibilities of being your best self. I think that's really what it comes down to is if you're on a journey for constant self-improvement, that is fulfilling, I think, why you're here. Like, and not to get overly spiritual, but I think we're all given this opportunity to live this life, to be the best versions of ourselves, not just for our own self, but for the collective good of those around us and to
Mhm.
spread love fundamentally. I mean, I think it's like hard to answer why is being healthy just for yourself important because it's not ever just about yourself.
Yeah, that's a good
It's
point.
about when you are the healthiest version of yourself, it has an immediate energy and ripple effect to those around you. And I
Yep.
think to the second part of the question, I think two answers about why being healthy is important for others. I think one, by example, right? So the model that you're sending as a leader, when you can model the way and not of perfection. And I think you made a great point. I made the statement earlier when we were planning this about like, you need to be the healthiest person in the room. I think that maybe sets that framework up to kind of feel as if it's a competition. Like
Yep.
somebody's going to be faster than you. Somebody's going to be more spiritually attuned than you. It's not about being better than everyone else. It's
Well,
about,
or once
oh, go
again,
ahead.
in the framework of leadership, not to interrupt,
No, no, please.
in the framework of leadership, we are already working to tell people, look, you don't always have to be the best at something. You have to be
Hmm.
the best. You have to work hard to get your team to understand their collective strengths and their collective genius.
Hmm.
And you are the catalyzer for that.
Right.
So again, if we're pushing on this framework of, well, if you're not the healthiest, then no one else will be healthy, it just already puts that pressure back on you as a leader again, versus how am I the catalyst for the health of the team? Like, how do I remind myself to be the catalyst by which we all feel empowered to be the healthiest versions of yourself? So super sorry to interrupt, but I just
No,
wanted
no,
to
I think it's an
expand that.
important point to make.
Yeah.
And I think that really at the heart of what we're getting at here is that you're modeling the way that we should be in a constant journey of self-improvement, and not
Mhm.
just with the technical skills of the role, whether you're a manager in an advanced manufacturing space and you need to help everyone design the machining process to be explicitly this direction. It's that, and it's also like you need to be helping people show up as the best versions of themselves, and it has to start with you.
Yeah.
So I think there's the model, but I also think there's some really pragmatic reasons that when you're less healthy, that it starts to create impact on others too. And I think we can expand on this into future questions. But really, like if you think about showing up in an unhealthy way for your team or when you're not your best, well, some people might see that and say, man, Josh is, or John or whomever is having a really hard week. And there's some people who really become empathetic, and then they maybe start to absorb like, well, if he can't do it, I'm going to jump in and solve for some of that. So you're going to have some people who might choose to work really hard when they notice that you're kind of falling short. You might have other people who see this as an opportunity. And, if you're a parent of kids in the 9 to 8 to 12 year range, 15, 16-year-old range, when I was sick a few weeks ago, I called out my youngest son, but I'm like, I think you're taking advantage of the fact that I'm sick to try to get more TV time. And he's like, yeah, probably.
Mhm.
But like sometimes if you're not aware of the level of health you're bringing into the space, you're going to have some people on the team who see that as an opportunity to potentially pull away or to pull back or to get away with something that maybe they shouldn't do. And others might, on maybe on a positive level, this maybe inadvertently creates and optimistically a space for other people to step in as you're less healthy and create some positive inertia developing for themselves, helping the team. But on the flip side, you can also create a void where there's potential for sabotage, for unhealthy dynamics on the team. And so there is a real through line between your health and the impact on your team.
Yeah.
John, what would you add to that? Thoughts on that, reactions?
Yeah, and I think this will kind of lead in. I was saying this at the beginning of the next section, but I think I'll say it now. Like, I think it is important to remind ourselves that what health looks like for one person is different for the other. We're going to talk about overworking in a minute. I might be able to get things done in a certain amount of time that others like take more time to do. And if they work a few hours later than me, or they work after dinner, I always disliked managers that were very like strict about. They tried to pretend like they were helping us live our best lives, and so they would do things like kick us out of the building or something like that. Go off and be healthy. This is actually more stressful for me. And so
Hmm.
I think just finding that's a long way of just saying, I think finding and understanding the balance that all of us have. And maybe this is also, health is not about being comparative, right? It's about just understanding that everyone has a unique way of doing that. And at times, though, if you notice like what I'm doing is not healthy or it's having a bad influence on others, you do have as a leader, the obligation to kind of model for people a good way of doing that. Right.
Yeah.
So sending midnight emails is not a good practice no matter what. I don't care what people say. Even if you say, well, I'm not telling them to send midnight emails. No, but they see you doing it, and that becomes a visual expectation of that.
Right.
If you're working in quiet at midnight because you want to, and you have an email crafted, but you wait to send it the next day, that's a lot healthier for your team. So I
Yeah.
don't know, maybe a little bit of a tangent there, but
No, I think
I
it's
think you got to
good.
find the balance between what works for you, but also make sure you're not signaling ways of being because of things you do, even if you say, well, I wasn't expecting them to do it that way.
Yeah.
They still might. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's a good specific example. One other thought on this, and then we can keep moving.
Yeah.
I just think it's so simple of like an example for most of us to picture. But when you're really sick and you have a kid who's sick
Mhm.
or your partner is sick, you can't take care of them. You can't take care of them very well. It might be like, or the other example of like the blind leading the blind. And the idea behind all of that is that if you're not at your best, you can't fulfill the responsibilities of taking care and being present for others. And when I say taking care of others, it's not, I think there's a fine line. And John, actually, I'd love for you to add color or disagree. I think as a leader, and this kind of goes to the over-functioning, under-functioning conversation a few weeks ago, what we're not saying is that it is your responsibility to take care of everyone else's needs on the team. I think everyone has
Yeah.
to have a degree of individual autonomy and agency to be responsible for what they need for what they don't have, to advocate, to take that degree of personal responsibility and accountability. And I think managers need to be attuned, and I think that word you used earlier is really important, attuned to the health of your team, to ask
Mhm.
questions,
Yeah.
to check in with them. It's not your job to solve the fact that you have a team member who is struggling with a physical health problem or a potentially feeling spiritually disconnected. You cannot be everything to everyone on your team, but you do need to be mindful. So when you think about if you are really not healthy, you do need to be able to be aware enough, attuned enough to the needs of your team. And if you're
Yeah.
ill, sick on the couch with the flu, you're probably, you can't take care of your sick kid very well. Similar applies to the work of leadership is you're not going to be there for your team if you yourself are not healthy.
Yeah. And are you attuned to the health of others and how they're feeling in terms of their interconnectedness of work and life and who they are as a person and all that? Do you have a team that is actively working towards that in their own way? Am I modeling that to the best of my ability? Like, am I showing that I'm working towards being healthy, that they see that? And then, are we doing things to encourage that? So not you're attuned, you're modeling it yourself, and then you find ways to encourage that balance and that integration is important, right? And I think that kind of takes us into this next one. Okay, right. So we've talked about why is this essential and important? It's not just for me, it's for those I lead and how we build that collaborate that connectedness together. So why do leaders neglect this? And what do they replace it with? Right. I think the why they neglect it is a much more complex question for me than what do they replace it with. And so I think we'll start with that one. I think they neglect it for a lot of reasons. One, society or the industry I am in, as an example, has determined that certain behaviors are more important than others. I'm a partner at a law firm. And so it's really important for me because of the culture of our place to work this many hours, be present working in this many ways. I mean, I don't even know if this is true for folks anymore, but when you and I first left college and a number of our friends were iBankers, it was well known that the culture among them was you worked very late and were present until senior leaders left. And then you were there before they arrived and you worked nutty hours. You got paid a bunch, but man, those folks were never healthy. But it was this idea of if I work through this for 4 or 5 years, I'm pretty set up. Right. Even first year teaching to a lesser degree, I think some of it was you're just going to work your tail off for your first 2 years and work insane hours getting stuff ready. I think when we came up, the expectation was basically, I think there was this feeling among people in our cohort, the people that I kind of grew up teaching with, that you should design things on your own because that's a real sign that you're being thoughtful versus using a curriculum or something. I think that shifts. But the point being is the industry might lead you to think that way. People around you might lead you to think that way. Also, don't get past that you have some personal responsibility. What is your level of need to compete? What is your level of need to be better than others? So there's all these reasons why we neglect it. Let alone we just have bad habits. So I don't build my calendar or my schedule with healthy habits in mind. I only build it with like, what's the work? And then what am I doing outside of that to kind of numb myself from the work? Right. So, Josh, maybe add some color to why do we neglect this before we get into, well, what do people replace it with, which we've started to get in on, or I started to get in on a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about it. I think again, lots of different answers. The frame or the two words that come to mind is intentional or accidental. And I think there's so much for new managers, for leaders, that when things get stressful, when things get busy, when things get, which they often are, both, you fall into the behaviors that are built in to kind of your operating system already. You're not choosing something new. You're likely not like, this is the time for me to really step back, slow down, reflect, and try a new behavior, try a new way of thinking, try a
Yeah.
new way of knowing. It really results in you doing the things that you kind of have baked in. And oftentimes those are your stress responses. Those are the things that you're doing not intentionally. It's just kind of your reactive phase. And so I think a lot of the times leaders neglect this. Neglect is almost not even to be viewed in this case as an active verb, but passively. Like you're not even aware that you're neglecting it because you're just going.
Yeah.
And I think the reason for it could be one of many things, but I think the inability to know that it's happening, I wouldn't say if it's even unwillingness, because if you don't know, you can't really be utilizing your will. But when it's happening so fast, you don't often stop and see what's going on, and then you just revert to habits that maybe aren't always that healthy. And maybe some are, right? I mean, it's possible you accidentally fall into really healthful behavior. So maybe you developed a really I'm saying this out loud. I wonder if it's even healthy, but maybe you developed in high school and college a really good workout routine so that you knew when you were stressed, you'd work out. You develop that. You might fall into doing that as a new manager when things get hard. Okay, good. That's good for your physical health. But is that extending to other elements of your health? Are you thinking about your social connections intentionally? Probably
Yeah.
not. And so I think a lot of the reason this happens is you just become accidental.
Yeah. I love going back to the idea of, are you being accidental about your health versus you just think you'll fall into it at some point? And so
Right.
that leads to the second question. What do people replace it with? And I don't want to be too exhaustive here, but when we were talking and structuring today's episode, I thought this part of it really reminded me of Dare to Lead by Brene Brown.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to hold that up. Oh, oops, I just hit the microphone. You know, a good book. I encourage you to read it. And one of the things that I find myself using often is her armored leadership versus daring leadership, right? I just want to talk about a few of these. So what do we replace it with? She has a list of the things that you might replace, and not all of these are about health specifically. They're about the way you lead. But a few of these just came to my mind as I was thinking about them. The first one I thought about is we hustle for our worth. This is a definite element of my own armored leadership, that I'm going to hustle. I'm just going to kind of work through things. I'm going to get through things on my own. I especially know this as a leader to prove to others that I'm capable of being in this. I think this sometimes comes from a feeling of imposter syndrome, right? Well, why do I even deserve to be in this position?
That was
Okay.
the word that came to mind. That phrase, 100%.
Yeah. And so we hustle, we show people we're working, not because we want them to work so much or it's important for us that their work. It's just that we have this innate need to prove something. Okay. So I might need to take a step back from that and find some other healthier habits. Hey, I'm going to limit myself on my time for this because I know that's important for me. I'm going to step away and do something else for a bit, something that's more integrating healthy habits for me. So that's one.
Mhm.
Numbing. Things get stressful. They're hard. Well, what do? We do things to numb us from that challenge and kind of try to mentally remove ourselves from it. And sometimes those are unhealthy things,
Instagram.
Instagram, Instagram for sure, 100%.
Yeah.
Scrolling on your phone, uh, booze. I sometimes will be like, I just need a really unhealthy meal right now because that sounds good, and whatever it might be. It's like this big release from the challenges of the day to day world. So again, are you not actually the things that remove you from the stress of the work or the thing? They're not actually unhealthy, even though they feel like they're distancing you, they're giving you mental space. Perhaps they're actually creating bigger problems. And then I'll just do one more here, which is rewarding exhaustion as a status symbol.
Oh, yeah.
I'm exhausting myself to say, look how hard I'm working. And that can be for
Oh,
vainglory
man.
reasons or, again, hustling for worth. And then I like this other one. There's
Well,
a ton of,
real fast on that, I
yeah,
think
go
a
for it.
signal for that one is when you start a phone call with your team and you listen to the first thing that most people say, and they're like, "Ooh, it's been a day. I'm here.
Busy work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's busy job, up
Yeah.
late." I think those are signals to listen for that.
I know.
Anyways, keep going. Sorry.
No, well, actually, I never liked this and probably people hated me for it, but it'd be Friday. And man, in schools, you'd be like, teachers and kids are like, it's Friday. We work so hard. It's finally almost over. And I was like, man, that's a real sad way of presenting school and work and the opportunity to learn.
Oof,
But
yeah.
I think it fits into that for me. Last one I'll say is you have this false dichotomy of I'm the victim or the Viking or the crush or be crushed. I think this is a harder one, but sometimes as a leader, you might say, well, I'm taking control. I'm conquering this situation. I'm going to stamp it. And that's how we're going to act versus understand that sometimes you might, not that you're the victim. Again, we don't want to do that, or you're getting crushed. And so you admit that and you're saying, I'm taking a step back. I'm going to do something else to balance out right now. Instead, you just pursue. So I don't want to go through everything. I just encourage people to, if nothing else, if you take the book and go to these 2 pages here, this kind of chart she's created,
Yeah.
I've come to it a lot in my life to ask, where am I at right now on some of these? Which one of these habits of armored leadership am I taking on right now? And what's the more daring leadership approach? And so that's one framework of a way that I think people replace healthy habits with, is these other mindsets that they think they have to have for whatever reason. And I think this book will help to give a language to some of
Yeah.
those things for folks if you don't have language for it already.
Yeah.
Right. Josh, thoughts on that, but then maybe with our time here, get us into
Yeah. Yeah.
strategies to support health as well.
Yeah, I mean, a quick thought just as you're going through all of that. I think this goes back, and I think the limbo that you navigate as a manager is often that doer or leader, kind of that tension of, are you doing? Like, and so many of us become managers because we're really good at doing things. And I
Yeah.
think so many of the forms of unhealthiness are overdoing it, over functioning, doing more, acting more, thinking more, taking charge more, proving more. And I think sometimes the best thing that you need to do as a leader is to stop and slow down
Yeah.
and take inventory and go slow to go fast. And in a culture, and I speak broadly about culture, but I would say in most of our Western culture, in our workplace cultures, in our industrial age, into now the digital age cultures, it's all about just speed to market, hustle, hustle, hustle. And so when you're a leader and a manager, I think that most likely your unhealthy habits are probably going to fall into the side of overfunctioning,
Yeah.
doing more than you can, doing more than you should, undercutting the ability of your team to actually solve for this with you, and then also making choices to actually not do as much. Like, I don't want to go too deep into this, but like one of the biggest things that I think companies struggle with, businesses struggle with, schools struggle with, is the idea of priority, right? Priority in
Totally.
Latin comes from literally the definition of one, singular, one, O-N-E. And yet
Mhm.
we try to get creative in putting together 3 priorities with 15 bullet points under each one. We do too much. And I
Yeah.
think as a manager and as a leader, one of the best things that you can do is to catch yourself over hustling and slow it down, examine your priorities, work with your leadership team to understand we're doing too much and we can choose different.
Yeah.
So that's my
Well,
last note on that.
yeah. And I think I just note that something that you thought is, I think we think of this too much as a zero sum game.
Mm.
And I think a huge area of limbo, and I don't have a great answer for this, is sometimes it does feel really hard to navigate the idea of, I have to get to results with my team, which means sometimes we have to push hard to get some things done or to do them the right way. And that's along with the balance of, how do I watch out that I'm like not overworking people or stressing them out too much on that. And I think that's a real tension to navigate. Great managers do that well. They
Absolutely.
practice at it. And that makes me wonder, Josh, I think this has actually been a good just overall thought on why health matters and what people replace it with. I wonder if next time we can even go a bit more in depth of using, I think what the next part was about supporting health and maybe some other strategies about that in a kind of a follow-up episode to give people some more ideas that we have. And maybe in that time, we can also encourage people to share their ways of how they promote health for themselves and for their teams. Thoughts on that?
No, I think that sounds like a good pivot. And for our listeners, we just to kind of bring you behind, what do they call it? The fifth wall, fourth wall, third wall? I don't
Right.
know.
Fourth wall is in theater, but
Okay, maybe the
behind
fourth
the curtain, I think it's
behind the curtain is we
behind
do
it.
try to make sure that these episodes land in that 30 or minute less zone.
Yep.
And so we know that we've been pushing it a little bit. We get really passionate. So I think that's a great pivot. I think what we can do for next week is dive into a little bit of solving for some of this
Yeah.
and get some ideas from, if you're listening to this, share some questions when it comes to like, this is a challenge I experience in trying to navigate health as a leader. So
Yeah.
maybe that could be our homework, and maybe a live pivot here is the homework would be, let us know, send us an email. We'll put them into the notes. You can find us on the website. You drop it in the comments, wherever it needs to go. But let us know what one of the biggest barriers to being the healthiest version of yourself is. And maybe we could live problem solve some of that next week, because I do think that it would be a rare person you'd speak to that would say, I don't think this matters. I think everyone listening to this is like, absolutely. But we can't be pie in the sky Pollyannas about this topic of health. There is a real fundamental level of like the day-to-day gets in the way. And so what
Yeah.
are those things that get in the way for you when it comes to trying to find the best version of yourself?
Yeah, my only other suggestion might be that you share with us not only your struggles, but strategies you have. The next episode will be about how to promote healthy habits, what some different things can look like in different categories. But I don't think Josh and I have all the answers to this. maybe not even most of the answers. So please share your ideas so we can share them and how that helps your teams as well. And so appreciate you listening. Please share with folks, share these ideas, send us that email. And until next time, this has been Leadership Limbo, where we make space for the tension and tools for the journey. See you in the in-between.